everyone, and welcome to Work in Progress, which is, as you know, TeamViewer's digital workplace talk. And this is our second episode, and we're really excited to have another tremendous guest, which is Andrew Hewitt. And I'm going to spend some time talking to him about all things DEX and everything around the end user market. Andrew, hello.
It's great to be here. Hey, Mark.
How are you?
Glad to chat again.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last time we were together doing something like this was in very different circumstances. We were driving around your hometown Boulder, Colorado, in a big SUV with a camera on the windscreen.
It's a lot safer this time, I feel like.
Safe, I'm not sure I was driving entirely safe at the time, but that was a fun time as well. And how amazing things change so much in life. And now we're working together here at TeamViewer. And why don't you just start by, your backgrounds as we know each other is from Forrester. But be great if you just really for the audience, give a little bit of your background and your journey to TeamViewer today.
Absolutely, yeah. So as you mentioned, I come from Forrester. I spent 11 years doing market research there, global market research company. And during my time there, I really defined the DEX space and helped lead our digital workplace team. And it was a fantastic journey. But one of the things that, was always interesting from an analyst point of view is you get that bird's eye view of everything that's going on in the industry. So you get to learn about all these different market trends and work with different companies. I was really looking forward to the opportunity to work with one single company, right? And I'm super passionate about DEX and, the ability to come here to TeamViewer. I just started about 2 months ago, as you know, is tremendous for me because we get to really be on the front lines with customers and really start to see what's resonating, what challenges they're dealing with. And obviously we have a tremendous opportunity to help them really transform.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, we're thrilled you're here and couldn't be happier. And I think that, it's testament to the opportunity that exists within TeamViewer as you're talking about. So I also think, you bring a very special skill set to the business. You have that amazing view of the market, and you've interacted with both many vendors as well as many organizations that are deploying DEX or deploying DEX or everything in between. So, let's start by talking about DEX. As you said, you really helped define that market. One of the, if you like, the original kind of inspirations for creating the market. And I know we learned a lot from you during our time at 1E, and we leveraged your expertise a lot. But let's talk about DEX. And why is DEX important? Look at it from an employee perspective, as well as the overall end user business perspective. Give us your view there.
Yeah, well Mark, from the individual perspective, one of the really interesting pieces of data that's come out recently from Gallup is that employee engagement is at its very lowest that it's been in an entire decade. Just 31% of the workforce, at least in the United States, according to their data, is what we would call engaged, which is a massive problem for organizations. If you think about the value that you're trying to drive, there's so much competition, there's a need to innovate, to be creative. If only, 31% of your workforce on average is actually engaged, there's way less opportunity for you to drive competitive differentiation. So it's a major challenge. Employees are feeling less and less connected to their organization every single year. And so DEX is a way to start re-engaging with that employee again, where I start to understand and take off the table, frankly, any issues that may get in the way of their overall productivity. What we know from the years of research at Forrester, as well as from other academic resources, is, people are most engaged when they're successful at work, when they're productive every single day. And if technology is getting in the way, then that's going to be one of those contributors of engagement. So DEX plays a huge role in laying that strong foundation for progress and productivity on a daily basis. The second side of that, to your question, is the business component, right? And not only is IT and IT organizations generally just more interested in managing that overall experience because they see it as a major opportunity and frankly a career growth opportunity for them as well, it's also now seen as really the way to run your IT department because you're bringing in a lot of that data. And when we look at DEX, it's about collecting all of that real-time data about what the end user's experiencing on a day-to-day basis. If you don't have that, you're just flying blind. You have no idea. You're just guessing what's happening in your IT department. And today in the modern age, with the competition the way that it is, you just can't afford to run your IT department like that. You really need to know and not be guessing. And so DEX provides that clarification that we wouldn't otherwise have.
Yeah. And it's one of the things I've seen firsthand over the last number of years, and I know it's where you spent a lot of your time during your time at Forrester, is helping organizations as they move up the maturity curve. Because end user computing is not new. And it's been around a long time, and organizations have had to deal with the fact that users are using technology to do their job. But there's kind of become a critical moment now where users are more dependent on technology than ever before, and the role of the IT worker is changing. So how did you see, how have you looked at it from a maturity point of view? Because lots of organizations are still quite new to DEX. I mean, many of the people that might be listening to this today are perhaps thinking about DEX. Is it something we should do or not do? And one of the ways I often talked about it in the market is it's like the next evolution of end user computing. But talk about that a little bit, because I know that's something you spent a lot of time on.
Absolutely. So you're right in terms of that next evolution of end user computing and of the service desk too. And it's actually it's the right time to get this type of innovation happening, because we've already had this in other parts of IT for years. If you look at the data center, you look at the cloud world, they've always had, well, not always, but over the last 10 years, they've had real-time data to help guide their decision making. This is for the first time happening for end user computing and service desk teams out there. So my contention overall is that DEX is going to be paramount for every business across the globe over the next 5 years, whether you're a small SMB, whether you're a large enterprise, whether you're in healthcare or retail or manufacturing. There's going to be these end user assets that you need to have visibility over. You need to be able to control those. And so for those that are in that kind of low maturity perspective, which, is a lot, it's the vast majority of the market are in that. And if you look at overall penetration rates of the DEX market today, it's small. It's the beginning of a movement. If for those immature organizations, you can really start by just starting to get clarity around what are the recurring issues, what are the things that are plaguing our employees on a day-to-day basis, what are the things that we're just constantly fixing over and over and over again, and really start to target those. As you get more mature, there's more things that you can do, and I'm sure we'll dig into that. But the immature customers, it's really about getting used to having a data-driven model for end-user computing and making that your mindset, rather than, like I said earlier, just guessing about what the problems are and how to fix them.
Yeah. And, the benefits of DEX, one of the things I remember seeing you give a presentation at an event a number of years ago, and it was after a fairly high-profile major outage of an airline that happened, and you talked about, this is DEX in action. This is because we often talk about the impact of bad experience to the employee and their lack of productivity and their frustration, and the impact on the business, of course. When you're not able to manage things and be precise, as you talk about, you end up with higher costs in terms of service desk costs, etc. But the real impact is when it starts to impact your overall business operations. But I mean, maybe you can talk about that example or different ones, but what are the things you've seen over the years that have the biggest impact?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, whenever there's a connection to customer experience, that is absolutely going to drive the conversation around DEX. And it's starting to move in that direction. We've definitely seen some examples. Airlines is definitely one. Point of sale machine within a retail environment, if I can monitor that, make sure that's running correctly, that means my customers are checking out faster. They're having a better experience. I've seen it in healthcare scenarios. If maybe there's a device that's patient side and they want to make sure that patient is having a good experience by having access to different services while they're in the hospital, right? There's all sorts of customer-facing examples of DEX. I think we're at the beginning of that journey as an industry. But when you can really have that direct link to the customer experience, that's when you can really drive that business outcome. So I think we'll continue to see more. Obviously, the majority of use cases today have been really focused on that internal IT department use case. Can I make sure that I solve issues faster, right? That's my reduction in mean time to resolution. Can I proactively take things off the table? So I'm not spending the engineering hours fixing those. I'm just, completely automating those out of my overall cost structure. Can I recoup licenses around applications, for example? A very, very common use case. Device lifecycle refresh around making sure that I have the optimized device for my environment and I'm not overspending on devices. All of those are really, really important pieces of the business case. And that's where I see the vast majority of, customers today thinking about, how do I justify the value of DEX? When you have that extra secret sauce of customer experience, let's say, that's when it really becomes something that is very, very easy to justify, because that's always top of mind for CEOs and CFOs. What's the customer experience like?
And when we think about this new paradigm shift of people thinking around a DEX strategy, and it is more of a movement in a business than just deploying technology. Historically, of course, organizations, how do they measure whether they're doing a good job in IT? It's like, well, how many, what's my SLAs look like, and how many tickets am I responding to, etc. But of course, DEX provides a different lens as to how you start to think about how well you're providing a service. And the concept of a DEX score, and there's something that you helped pioneer through your work at Forrester. But talk about that, because I think that this is one of the key differences between traditional end user compute and thinking about it from a DEX perspective is how you think about measuring the impact of what you're doing.
Absolutely. So traditionally, we do use those SLAs, right? Is the service up? Is it available? And by service, I mean my endpoints, my operating systems, my applications, etc. That's a very low bar these days. I just want to make sure that it runs. Not a very differentiating way to run your IT department. Where it's shifting is away from SLA to what we call XLA, experience level agreement. So that is, what is the outcome for the employee as a result of having that good experience, right? And so a lot of organizations have started down that path of the XLA and started to think about, okay, how does all of this quantitative information that I'm collecting ultimately enable someone to be successful? And the way that you often do that, and I think the special thing that DEX brings to the market, is bringing in that sentiment analysis too. So I can say, yes, all my metrics look really good, and my employees believe that this is a really good experience. And that's the best case scenario. You have that. If there's a mismatch between those things, it tells you either you need to take a look at those metrics and make some changes, or you really need to focus on that employee survey and start to dig deeper into what's some of the underlying issues. So that shift towards XLA is really about putting the employee at the center, bringing in a lot of their sentiment, and also looking very holistically across that experience, right? It's not just about what's happening from a device perspective or from a network perspective, right? It's the combination of everything together that impacts the experience. And DEX score gives you that North Star to really strive for.
Yeah, awesome. Now, let's think about TeamViewer in particular. Now, one of the things that I know caught your interest about the TeamViewer acquisition of 1E, and certainly obviously was something I was passionate about, which is how we got to doing the deal, was that, TeamViewer's probably one of the better known brands in the end user computing IT space, and is the best known and the most pervasive remote control tool that's in the market. And of course, is used not just in enterprises, but across all areas of the industry, SMB, MSP. And of course, the attraction here was that, okay, if you bring together DEX technology, particularly around automation and remediation, with remote control, you can create something quite compelling. And we're on that journey now together and helping define what that looks like. And we just recently announced TeamViewer 1, which I know you have been a big pioneer of. Talk a little bit about that, because I think that this is quite a big shift for the company, isn't it? How we're thinking.
Absolutely. So when you think about remote support, right, a lot of times there's this perception out there in the market that, hey, this is kind of a technology that's fading, right? Because we're trying to proactively fix more and more things. But the reality is that technology is technology. So it's a bit naive to say that this is going to completely, take out a particular element of IT support. There's always going to be a need for that expert one-on-one, just-in-time remote support capability. But where the really interesting point is how they start to complement each other. Yeah. So obviously we have this concept of AI-enabled session insights, right? So if I am a support technician, I'm going into an employee's device, I can start to record that overall session and start to garner some information about what actually fixed the problem. The super interesting component is, how do you build that into the rest of the platform with some of the 1E capabilities of building an automation based off of what's generated out of that session? And then you have this gratuitous feedback loop of, hey, these are the session insights that we're uncovering. We're building automations and proactively starting to take those off the table. And we're starting to inform and give the technician those automations to run if they need to as well within that session. It starts to become this very, very interesting story of much better together. And so that's one of the major reasons I was really intrigued at joining TeamViewer, is the opportunity to really create something new in the marketplace that I think has a lot of value for customers.
Yeah. No, we're super excited about it. And it definitely is a huge opportunity to take that combined offering and broaden it and take it to, not just enterprise where from a 1E perspective, we spend a lot of time, but bring that DEX functionality down market. And one of the things we launched, of course, recently is DEX Essentials, which was really the first move to take some of that, particularly that automation capability, and bring it down into those smaller businesses that perhaps haven't had access to that type of technology before, and sort of democratizing the possibility of using that technology. But, I mean, what's your perspective there? Because, I mean, the truth is, whether I'm a small MSP or a small IT team, I have the same challenges when it comes to managing the endpoint that a large enterprise does.
Yeah. I mean, if we look at the historical, footprint of the market, of course, it is in the large enterprise, right? That's where a lot of this started. But a traditional challenge with DEX has been time to value, use case development, hiring the right personas and personnel to go and manage my DEX initiative. And so that's why it's remained very sort of enterprise focused. But if we look at the future here, every organization is going to need to be able to use data to drive decision making. And that also applies to the SMB as well. And so what's really interesting about what we've done with DEX Essential is take all the most important components of how you measure that experience and how do you remediate the capabilities, remediate issues, and provide that in a packaged solution so that they get that time to value. When we help the SMB customers to really mature their organization, what we're really trying to do is make sure that they can do that very quickly. They don't have to spend a lot of time on use case development, and that they get value out of it very, very quickly. So it's going to look different, DEX in an enterprise versus an SMB customer, but fundamentally, everybody needs to use data to make decisions. Like, it can no longer just be let's IT fly blindly into the sky.
Yeah, agree. And it's been thrilling actually over the last month for us to watch lots of these smaller businesses start to adopt this DEX Essentials product. And as we suspected, there is latent demand in our customer base where customers are saying, well, I'm using remote today and I'm using a manual approach to doing lots of these things. If I can automate and fix things in an autonomous way, that's a no-brainer. So that's super exciting. Now, generally about DEX, I mean, let's have some sort of quick fire stuff. So what have you seen as some of the common myths that exist around DEX?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of them is that DEX is an enterprise only initiative, which we've covered. It's not. I think it's definitely started there, but it's expanding. Another major myth that I've seen with organizations going forward is that you need to have a certain level of maturity. Of course, you need to have the basics in place. Like, you need to be doing some endpoint management, but you can start a DEX initiative with just a basic survey.
Yes.
Right. And so getting started early is really the key point of this. If you don't have that culture, that buy-in, that leadership, executive approval, you can always get started just by going out and talking to those users and starting to get an idea of what some of those issues are. So there's this myth that you need to be a certain level of maturity in order to have DEX. I think you can always get started. It's just, when does the tooling make the most sense for you to actually go out and deploy? I think another major myth that we see out there in the marketplace is that DEX providers are really best as kind of a pure play capability, right? And that's certainly where the space has started. But what we're seeing, especially as you go down market, is the rise of more of these platform plays, where you want to be able to use that DEX data not just for enabling a better experience, but for helping out with security and compliance, for aiding your IT operations, right? And so this idea that it needs to be kind of this standalone thing, it doesn't necessarily need to be that, especially if that's not how it aligns with your business needs as an IT professional.
On that path, I mean, one of the things I think is complex for the IT teams that are looking after the device estates is there's so many technologies they could deploy or perhaps should deploy, remote control, RMM, DEM, DEX, etc. Now, one of the things is bringing all this together into a platform, this TeamViewer One platform that we've created. I think one of the major differentiators is bringing this DEX capability to all of the market. But when you think about that, I mean, how is DEX so different, and what is the difference it provides over and above a classic kind of remote monitoring management platform?
Well, the first thing is obviously the data, right? Other endpoint management tools, classically speaking, support tools, they don't have that real-time data about what's happening. And it's more than just say, okay, I'm collecting that data, right, in real time. There are multiple ways to think about real time. It's not just collection of data, but it's when are you reporting that back, and then how are you using it to remediate it? So real-time remediation should be the follow-on when you think about real-time data collection as well. And so that's what DEX brings that is super unique. And that's why you see, pure play DEX vendors, obviously, having a lot of success, but also the endpoint management players investing in DEX quite a bit as well, is because they see the value of having that data-driven strategy. And secondly, they see the value of connecting it to remediation. With other monitoring tools out there, you're not getting that remediation. Remediation means alerting for those tools a lot of the time. Doesn't mean actually fixing the problem. And so the combination of data collection plus remediation is what differentiates DEX. Then you layer on that employee sentiment component on top, and that's where you get that human-centric approach to enabling your IT organization.
Yeah, good. Now, what's your currently, what do you think is the big hot sort of takeaway about DEX at the moment?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I remember last year my prediction was around DEX expansion.
Yes.
And I predicted there was going to be a merger acquisition in the DEX space, a major one, and here I am. Yes, a few months later. So it's been really exciting to see that. I think we will continue to see more consolidation. I don't think that's the biggest take, though. I think that's a natural component of kind of every market. I think where the biggest opportunity is going to be is in agentic AI and moving towards more of that autonomous future. Today, there's a lot of work that IT leaders are working on when it comes to DEX. But as we start to integrate with these broader AI agents, whether they're chatbots or services from some of the big hyperscaler providers, there's a huge opportunity to actually let go of the reins of managing this entire environment and actually have more of that autonomous agent running. And I think that's what's really going to differentiate offerings going forward is like how much of that autonomy are we actually able to grant to IT and still have them trust in the capability that they're letting go of as well.
Yeah. Excellent. And, one last, maybe to wrap up on, I mean, one of the things that I hear from CIOs regularly, it was one of the big sort of trends in the enterprises in particular is like, how can I depend more on certain vendors and do more with less and not have so many solutions, so many products out there because it's costly. And it's not only the cost of the software or the platform, it's also the running costs, it's the internal costs, et cetera, And one of the things we're, of course, able to do now with the combination of the 1E platform and TeamViewer is effectively start to drive more tool consolidation for enterprises. So, I mean, maybe give a perspective on that, because, I mean, you spent a long part of your career now talking with enterprises, talking with CIOs. I mean, this is a hot topic for CIOs, particularly in the current economic sort of conditions.
Yep. So cost considerations are certainly a major driver of that consolidation. But it's also this problem that we've seen in IT for a number of years, which is that the user environment is getting more complex. You have different types of users working from different locations on multiple different types of devices and operating systems on who knows how many SaaS applications seems to explode every year. And now people are talking about generative applications, which are going to, multiply that application ecosystem even more. It's just getting more and more complex. Something's got to give.
Yes.
I can't be managing all of that with all these discrete capabilities. And so IT is looking at this increasing complexity and going, my current portfolio is not going to be able to manage that at scale. It's going to be so expensive. It's going to be hard to keep up all the right skill sets and things around everything. And so the question of consolidation is about, one, how do I make it simpler to manage that increased complexity? And also, how do I insulate myself from challenges in the future, right? If I can have everybody on a single platform, and I don't have all these different, skill sets in my IT department, I'm not worried if someone just randomly leaves and all of a sudden I don't have someone that can support my Mac environment or something, right? I need to have everybody kind of on a single platform because it helps make me resilient as an IT organization. And the final major piece around platform is, and it will kind of circle back as we started here, which is data.
Yeah.
Like if you don't have a consolidated platform and you have all of these different point solutions, how are you going to integrate that data to make good decisions? Like ultimately, you should be using the data across multiple different use cases, and that's going to require a platform approach. So I think that the needs around AI and around data are driving a lot of that consideration around platform. And of course, there's always a need for point solutions here and there and so forth. I think that'll always be the case because new technology is always coming out. It's interesting to use and experiment with. But for the most part, people are trying to make strategic decisions about vendors that they work with. And that ultimately leads to that platform-based approach.
That's right. And one last question for me, because is one I enjoy talking about, and I know you do. So the changing role of IT, given areas like DEX, where DEX allows IT to become far more strategic, and there's almost a blending or a blurring of lines between IT, HR. Yeah, and the way I always look at it is, in a world we live in now where people work remote, they work from anywhere, their working patterns have changed, the dependence on technology is more than it's ever been. Everyone's job is a digital job. Everyone is a digital employee. The relationship to the employee is increasingly a digital relationship, and therefore to get the best experience and the best productivity for employees, you must really have this kind of DEX approach and DEX strategy. But give us your perspective on that, because you've seen it happen in real time, the changing strategic role of IT in the enterprise.
Absolutely. So I would say, and maybe this is another hot take, DEX is the biggest opportunity for IT in the last, let's say, 5 years, especially when you think about it in the context of end user computing and service desk, where I'm moving out of managing those devices and those apps and I'm managing that experience, right? Once you start managing that experience, that makes you a much more critical member of your overall business strategy. And so what we're seeing with IT organizations is when they mature to a certain level with DEX, all of a sudden it starts to break out of IT. All of a sudden they start to see, collaboration happening between facilities and HR and, leadership, for example, to start thinking about, okay, what are the employee journeys that really need addressing that may cross the boundary from IT into other areas, like say onboarding or something like that. And so ultimately, when someone gets to that level of maturity, they start having to deal with the really difficult problems of what's really holding people back. And that's usually something related to the employee journey. But you can't solve that unless you're collaborating across multiple different business units. So this gives, IT that seat at the table in the business discussion again, in ways that they really haven't had in the past, right? So it's moving from that cost center, management, security, compliance, et cetera, all the way to enabling the entire organization. And especially if you think about the influx of AI, IT is going to be needed more and more to help enable that workforce to drive innovation. So I think it's a huge opportunity for IT leaders today.
Awesome. Great. Well, it's a great note to finish on. Exciting times in the industry in general, exciting times here for us both at TeamViewer, which we're enjoying. We're here in sunny Berlin at the moment and enjoying a couple of days of a really brilliant workshop, and we managed to step out to do this, which I was thrilled about. So thanks, Andrew. Thanks for coming on and doing this, and looking forward to the journey ahead. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you next time with another episode with some more interesting talks around digital workplace.